Hey everybody, it's Shari here today, and I am going to be showing you how I made this collection of watermelon themed cards. So I'm using the rainy backdrop dies, so I'm just going to use them in a different way to make my watermelon seeds. I thought these were perfectly shaped for watermelon seeds, and that this would be a fun way to kind of stretch your dies. So I've got some guava cardstock here, and I'm going to cut both the portrait and the landscape of the rainy backdrops. And then I'm going to cut each one of those in half, and that's how I'm going to get 4 cards. So if you want to know the exact measurements on that, I cut that portrait one, which is 5.5 tall. I cut that at 2 3/4. And then for this landscape one, I'm going to cut it long ways. It's 4 1/4 wide, so I'm going to be cutting that at 2 1/8. Now these are just in half, but you could cut them at whatever size you want for the design of your card. So now I can cut some pieces of black cardstock that are the same size. So again, it's going to be 5.5 by 2 1/4 and 1/3, 4 1/4 by 2 3/4. So now I'm just going to layer those behind, and I'm going to go ahead and prep all my little seed pieces here. And I'm just using the Lawn Fawn glue tube to do that, so I can get in there in between all those little seeds. And then I'm going to cut some little tiny strips of cardstock out of white. So these are only about 1/8 of an inch wide. Then I'm going to cut some strips out of cilantro cardstock. These are 5/8 of an inch wide. And then finally I'll cut some out of the Noble Fir cardstock. And these are about 3/16 wide, so a little wider than the white. I'm going to use my liquid glue to go ahead and glue that tiny little white strip onto the edge of my light green. And now I'm going to assemble some cards. So I've already got my seeds put together, and I've already got my light color of my rind put together. So now I can just layer all these pieces onto the card. So for this first one, I just layered that long, wide piece of seeds along the bottom of a landscape card. I put the dark piece of cardstock strip right against the edge of it, and then I used the light colored with the white and layered it over top and covered up the seed. So I've used some Finley's ABCs and some black cardstock to cut out the letters that spell out melon. And then I'm using some Harold's ABCs to customize my sentiment so that it will say "You're one in a melon." So you just line these up right on the block. They're on square bases, and you just line it up with the grid right against each other, and you'll get a perfectly spaced, nice and straight sentiment. So I'm going to go ahead and glue all those letters down. I just had them laying there so I could kind of get the spacing of the sentiment above right and figuring out exactly where I wanted it. And I'm actually butting the bottom of these right against that piece of cardstock, so it's going to be nice and straight because I'm using that as my line for my letters. And now once those are glued down, I can just finish it off by stamping the custom sentiment that I created. Such a fun card. And it goes great with this watermelon theme. So now I'm going to do a portrait card, and I'm kind of flipping it around, and I'm going to put the dark part on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on there, and then I can add the seeds. And I'm turning it around to where the very finished edge instead of the cut edge is at the top. And then I'm going to take my watermelon rind I've prepped before with the white piece already on it and just cover up the gap between those two pieces. And then I can just trim off the excess. So rather than cutting 2 short ones and 2 long ones, I just cut them all long. And I'm just going to trim off the excess. It was just a lot easier to cut them all from the same width piece of cardstock. Now I have this scripty sweet die cut here, and I'm just putting that on with some liquid glue. And then I'm going to use my alphabet again to spell out the words "you're so." So it says "you're so sweet." And I really like this kind of mixing of fonts, using the stamps for some of the words and die cuts for the rest. You could also do this by mixing different fonts of the alphabet stamps. So once I've got that lined up where I want it, and I actually do test this on a piece of scrap paper just to make sure that it's how I wanted it in the right spacing, that's going to fit right in there between that S and that T. And then of course, there's not an apostrophe in this particular set, I think, because the stamp would be too long and skinny. So I'm just going to add that with a black pen. And now it's complete. So moving on to the third card, I'm going back to my landscape card here. Actually, this isn't a landscape card. This is also a portrait card, but I am turning the landscape piece that I made sideways. So it's going to go up and down on the left side of the card. And then we're also going to do the same thing on a landscape card. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm putting all my pieces together. Because I'm putting this vertical on the card, I didn't want the seed piece to be quite as big as I cut it. So I just stacked everything on top of it. Now I'm using the smallest of the speech bubble stackables, and I'm also using that little high that comes with the frame speech bubble stackables. I'm cutting them out at the same time, and I'm going to use the solid bubble with the high cut out. I think of the 4 that I made, this one might be my favorite, but I just really like that dark speech bubble. So once I've got that down, I'm actually going to put the speech bubble on using some foam adhesive. And I'm just kind of figuring out where I want it. It's going to overlap that a little bit. So I'm going to add a whole bunch of foam adhesive to the back of this. And I'm using some black foam squares because I've got black cardstock here, just because I happen to have those. And if you can see there, I've also added a tiny one that's been cut in half to the part that's in the middle of that loop in the H. And you'll see here how I get that in here just a minute. But the foam adhesive is already on that little insert. So once I get my bubble in place, I can take the high that I have there, I can pull that liner off that little piece of foam that I've got on that middle part of the H. And if you can see it there, I'm just going to put that in with my tweezers, hold it in place, and just press down on that piece that goes in the middle, and then I can just pop out the part that I don't want to keep. So there is that finished card. It is super cute. I just really like that bold sentiment right down there in the bottom corner. And then for this last card, I've got a landscape card. And again, I'm taking that portrait rainy backdrop that I've made into seeds and I'm putting it on the left side. So I'm just going to layer my dark green strip on top of it. And then I'm going to do the same with my light green strip that I've made with the white. And I'll trim off the excess. And then I've got the scripty hello border cut from some black. And I'm just going to put that on the white part to the right side. I've already trimmed off part of that border because I want it to kind of look like it's coming out from behind the watermelon. So I'm just going to put that right up against that dark green rind that I've created there, and then I can just trim off the extra little piece of that sentiment that's hanging off the side. And there is the 4th card. So I made 4 cards from 2 die cuts and just some strips of paper, and then added different sentiments to each one. And I just think these are some really fun cards for summer. So here are some look at those finished cards up close. And I just really like this different way of using the rainy backdrop die. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.